A Boy and His Dog by Harlan Ellison. Read by Kimura Gracie. I was out with Blood, my dog. It was his week for annoying me. He kept calling me Albert. He thought that was pretty damned funny. Payson Terhune, ha ha. I'd caught a couple of water rats for him, the big green and ochre ones, and someone's manicured poodle lost off a leash in one of the down-unders. He'd eaten pretty damned good, but he was cranky. "Come on, son of a bitch," I demanded. "Find me a piece of ass." Blood just chuckled, deep in his dog throat. "You're funny when you get horny," he said. Maybe funny enough to kick him upside his sphincter asshole, that refugee from a dingo heap. "Find. I ain't kiddin'. For shame, Albert. After all I've taught you? Not I ain't kidding. I'm not kidding." He knew I'd reached the edge of my patience. Sullenly, he started casting. He sat down on the crumbled remains of the curb, and his eyelids flickered and closed, and his hairy body tensed. After a while, he settled down on his front paws and scraped them forward till he was lying flat, and his shaggy head on the outstretched paws. The tenseness left him, and he began trembling, almost the way he trembled just preparatory to scratching a flea. It went on that way for almost a quarter of an hour, and finally he rolled over and laid on his back, his naked belly towards the sky, his front paws folded mantis-like, his hind legs extended and open. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's nothing." I could have gotten mad and booted him, but I knew he had tried. I wasn't happy about it. I really wanted to get laid, but what could I do? "Okay," I said with resignation. "Forget it." He kicked himself onto his side and quickly got up. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "Not much we can do, is there?" I was more than a little sarcastic. He sat down again at my feet, insolently humble. I leaned against the melted stub of a lamppost and thought about girls. It was painful. "We can always go to a show," I said. Blood looked around the street, at the pools of shadow lying in the weed-overgrown craters, didn't say anything. The whelp was waiting for me to say, "Okay, let's go." He liked the movies as much as I did. "Okay, let's go." He got up and followed me, his tongue hanging, panting with happiness. "Go ahead and laugh, you egg sucker. No popcorn for you." Our gang was a rover pack that had never been able to cut it simply foraging, so they'd opted for comfort and gone a smart way to getting it. They were movie-oriented kids, and they'd taken over the turf where the Metropole Theater was located. No one tried to bust their turf, because we all needed the movies, and as long as our gang had access to films and did a better job of keeping the films going, they provided a service, even for solos like me and Blood, especially for solos like us. They made me check my .45 and the Browning .22 long barrel at the door. There was a little alcove right beside the ticket booth. I bought my tickets first. It cost me a can of Oscar Mayer Philadelphia Scrapple for me and a tin of sardines for Blood. Then the R gang guards with the Bren guns motioned me over to the alcove and I checked my heat. I saw water leaking from a broken pipe in the ceiling, and I told the checker, a kid with big leathery warts all over his face and lips, to move my weapons where it was dry. He ignored me. "Hey you, motherfucking toad, move my stuff over to the other side. It goes to rust fast, and it picks up any spots, man. I'll break your fucking bones." He started to give me jaw about it, looked at the guards with the Brens, knew if they tossed me out I'd lose my price of admission whether I went in or not, but they weren't looking for any action, probably under strength, and gave him the nod to let it pass, to do what I said. So the toad moved my Browning to the other end of the gun rack and pegged my .45 under it. Blood and me went into the theater. "I want popcorn." "Forget it." "Come on, Albert. Buy me popcorn." "I'm tapped out. You can live without popcorn." "You're just being a shit." I shrugged. "Sue me." We went in. The place was jammed. I was glad the guards hadn't tried to take anything but my guns. My spike and knife felt reassuring, lying up in their oiled sheaths at the back of my neck. Blood found two together, and we moved into the row, stepping on feet. Someone cursed, and I ignored him. A Doberman growled. Blood's fur stirred, but he let it pass. There was always some hard case on the muscle, even on neutral ground like the Metropole. I heard once about a get-it-on they'd had at the old Lowe's Granada on the south side, wound up with 10 or 12 rovers and their mutts dead. The theater burned down and a couple of good Cagney films lost in the fire. After that was when the rover packs had got up the agreement that movie houses were sanctuaries. It was better now, but there was always somebody too messed in the mind to come soft. It was a triple feature. Raw deal with Dennis O'Keefe, Claire Trevor, Raymond Burr, and Marcia Hunt. It had been made in 1948, 86 years ago. God only knows how the damn thing hung together all that time. It slipped sprockets and they had to stop the movie all the time to rethread it. But it was a good movie, about this solo who'd been japped by his rover pack and was out for revenge. Gangsters, mobs, a lot of punching and fighting. Real good. The middle flick was a thing made during the Third War, in '92, 27 years before I was even born. Thing called Smell of a Chink. It was mostly gut spilling and some nice hand-to-hand. Beautiful scene of skirmisher greyhounds equipped with napalm throwers, jelly burning a chink town. Blood dug it. Even though we'd seen this flick before, he had some kind of phony shuck going that these were ancestors of his, and he knew and I knew he was making it up. "Want to burn a baby, hero?" I whispered to him. He got the barb and just shifted in his seat, didn't say a thing, kept looking pleased as the dogs worked their way through town. I was bored stiff. I was waiting for the main feature. Finally, it came on. It was a beauty, a beaver flick made in the late 1970s. It was called Big Black Leather Splits. Started right out very good. These two blondes in black leather corsets and boots laced all the way up to their crotches, with whips and masks, got this skinny guy down and one of the chicks sat on his face, while the other one went down on him. It got really hairy after that. All around me there were solos playing with themselves. I was about to jog it a little myself when Blood leaned across and said, real soft, the way he does when he's onto something unusually smelly, "There's a chick in here." "You're nuts," I said. "I tell you, I smell her. She's in here, man." Without being conspicuous, I looked around. Almost every seat in the theater was taken with solos or their dogs. If a chick had slipped in there, there'd have been a riot. She'd have been ripped to pieces before any single guy could have gotten into her. "Where?" I asked softly. All around me, the solos were beating off, moaning as the blondes took off their masks and one of them worked the skinny guy with a big wooden ram strapped around her hips. "Give me a minute," Blood said. He was really concentrating. His body was tense as a wire. His eyes were closed, his muzzle quivering. I let him work. It was possible, just maybe possible. I knew that they made really dumb flicks in the Down Unders, the kind of crap they'd made back in the 30s and 40s, real clean stuff with even married people sleeping in twin beds, Myrna Loy and George Brent kind of flicks, and I knew that every once in a while a chick from one of the really strict middle-class Down Unders would come up to see what a real hairy flick was like. I'd heard about it, but it never happened in any theater I'd ever been in, and the chances of it happening in the Metropole particularly were slim. There was a lot of twisty trade came to the Metropole. Now understand, I'm not specially prejudiced against guys corning one another. Hell, I can understand it. There just aren't enough chicks anywhere. But I can't cut the jockey and boxer scene because it gets some weak little boxer hanging on you, getting jealous. You have to hunt for him and he thinks all he has to do is bare his ass to get all the work done for him. It's as bad as having a chick dragging along behind. Made for a lot of bad blood and fights in the bigger rover packs too. So I just never swung that way. Well, not never, but not for a long time. So with all the twisties in the Metropole, I didn't think a chick would chance it. Be a toss-up who'd tear her apart first, the boxers or the straights. And if she was here, why couldn't any of the other dogs smell her? "Third row in front of us," Blood said. "Aisle seat, dressed like a solo." "How's come you can whiff her and no other dogs caught her?" "You forget who I am, Albert." "I didn't forget. I just don't believe it." Actually, bottom line, I guess I did believe it. When you'd been as dumb as I'd been, and a dog like Blood had taught me so much, a guy came to believe everything he said. You don't argue with your teacher. Not when he taught you how to read and write and add and subtract and everything else they used to know that meant you were smart, but doesn't mean much of anything now, except it's good to know, I guess. The reading's a pretty good thing. It comes in handy when you can find some canned goods someplace, like in a bombed-out supermarket. Makes it easier to pick out stuff you like when the pictures are gone off the labels. Couple of times the reading stopped me from taking canned beets. Shit, I hate beets. So I guess I did believe why he could whiff a maybe chick in there, and no other mutt could. He told me all about that a million times. It was his favorite story. History, he called it. Christ, I'm not that dumb. I knew what history was. That was all the stuff that happened before now. But I liked hearing history straight from Blood, instead of him making me read one of those crummy books he was always dragging in. And that particular history was all about him, so he laid it on me over and over, till I knew it by heart. No, the word was rote. Not rote like writing. That was something else. I knew it by rote. Means you got it word for word. And when a mutt teaches you everything you know, and he tells you something rote, I guess you finally do believe it. Except I'd never let that leg lifter know it. What he'd told me rote was, over 65 years ago in Los Angeles, before the Third World War even got going completely, there was a man named Blessing who lived in Cerritos. He raised dogs as watchmen and sentries and attackers. Dobermans, Danes, Schnauzers, and Japanese Akitas. He had one 4-year-old German Shepherd bitch named Ginger. She worked for the Los Angeles Police Department's narcotics division. She could smell out marijuana no matter how well it was hidden. They ran a test on her. There were 25,000 boxes in an auto parts warehouse. 5 of them had been planted with marijuana sealed in cellophane, wrapped in tinfoil and heavy brown paper, and finally hidden in 3 separate sealed cartons. Within 7 minutes, Ginger found all 5 packages. At the same time that Ginger was working, 92 miles farther north in Santa Barbara, cetologists had drawn and amplified dolphin spinal fluid and injected it into chacma baboons and dogs. Altering surgery and grafting had been done. The first successful product of this cetacean experimentation had been a 2-year-old male puli named Abu, who had communicated sense impressions telepathically. Crossbreeding and continued experimentation had produced the first skirmisher dogs, just in time for the Third War. Telepathic over short distances, easily trained, able to track gasoline or troops or poison gas or radiation when linked with their human controllers. They had become the shock commandos of a new kind of war. The selective traits had bred true. Dobermans, greyhounds, Akitas, Poolies, and Schnauzers had become steadily more telepathic. Ginger and Abu had been Blood's ancestors. He had told me so 1,000 times. He had told me the story in just that way, in just those words 1,000 times, as it had been told to him. I'd never believed him till now. Maybe the little bastard was special. I checked out the Solo scrunched down in the aisle seat 3 rows ahead of me. I couldn't tell a damn thing. The Solo had her, cap pulled way down, fleece jacket pulled way up. Are you sure? As sure as I can be. It's a girl. If it is, she's playing with herself just like a guy. Blood snickered. Surprise, he said sarcastically. The mystery Solo sat through Raw Deal again. It made sense if that was a girl. Most of the Solos and all the members of the Rover Packs left after the Beaver flick. The theater didn't fill up much more. It gave the streets time to empty. He or she could make his or her way back to wherever he or she had come from. I sat through Raw Deal again myself. Blood went to sleep. When the mystery Solo got up, I gave him or her time to get weapons if any had been checked and started away. Then I pulled Blood's big shaggy ear and said, "Let's do it." He slouched after me up the aisle. I got my guns and checked the street. Empty. "Okay, Nose," I said. "Where'd he go?" "Her. To the right." I started off, loading the Browning from my bandolier. I still didn't see anyone moving among the bombed-out shells of the buildings. This section of the city was crummy, really bad shape. But then with our gang running the Metropole, they didn't have to repair anything else to get their livelihood. It was ironic. The Dragons had to keep an entire power plant going to get tribute from the other Rover Packs. Ted's bunch had to mine the reservoir. The Bastinados worked like field hands in the marijuana gardens. The Barbados Blacks lost a couple of dozen members every year cleaning out the radiation pits all over the city, and our gang only had to run that movie house. Whoever their leader had been, however many years ago it had been that the rover packs had started forming out of foraging solos, I had to give it to him. He'd been a flinty sharp motherfucker. He knew what services to deal in. "She turned off here," Blood said. I followed him as he began loping toward the edge of the city, and the bluish-green radiation that still flickered from the hills. I knew he was right then. The only things out here were screamers and the access drop shaft to the down under. It was a girl, all right. The cheeks of my ass tightened as I thought about it. I was going to get laid. It had been almost a month since Blood had whiffed that solo chick in the basement of the Market Basket. She'd been filthy, and I'd gotten the crabs from her. But she'd been a woman, all right, and once I'd tied her down and clubbed her a couple of times, she'd been pretty good. She liked it, too, even if she did spit on me and tell me she'd kill me if she ever got loose. I left her tied up just to be sure. She wasn't there when I went back to look week before last. "Watch out," Blood said, dodging around a crater almost invisible against the surrounding shadows. Something stirred in the crater. Trekking across the no man's land, I realized why it was that all but a handful of solos or members of rover packs were guys. The war had killed off most of the girls, and that was the way it always was in wars. At least that's what Blood told me. The things getting born were seldom male or female, and had to be smashed against a wall as soon as they were pulled out of the mother. The few chicks who hadn't gone down under with the middle-classers were hard, solitary bitches like the one in the Market Basket, tough and stringy and just as likely to cut off your meat with a razor blade once they let you get in. Scuffling for a piece of ass had gotten harder and harder the older I'd gotten. But every once in a while a chick got tired of being rover pack property, or a raid was got up by 5 or 6 rover packs and some unsuspecting down under was taken. Or, like this time, some middle-class chick from a down under got hot pants to find out what a beaver flick looked like and come up. I was going to get laid. Oh boy, I couldn't wait. Out here, it was nothing but empty corpses of blasted buildings. One entire block had been stomped flat, like a steel press had come down from heaven and given one solid wham, and everything was powder under it. The chick was scared and skittish. I could see that. She moved erratically, looking back over her shoulder and to either side. She knew she was in dangerous country. Man, if she'd only known how dangerous. There was one building standing all alone at the end of the smash-flat block, like it had been missed and chance let it stay. She ducked inside, and a minute later I saw a bobbing light. Flashlight, maybe. Blood and I crossed the street and came up into the blackness surrounding the building. It was what was left of a YMCA. That meant Young Men's Christian Association. Blood had taught me to read. So what the hell's a Young Men's Christian Association? Sometimes being able to read makes more questions than if you were stupid. I didn't want her getting out. Inside there was as good a place to screw her as any, so I put Blood on guard right beside the steps leading up into the shell, and I went around the back. All the doors and windows had been blown out, of course. It wasn't no big trick getting in. I pulled myself up to the ledge of a window and dropped down inside. Dark inside. No noise except the sound of her moving around on the other side of the old YMCA. I didn't know if she was healed or not, and I wasn't about to take any chances. I bow-slung the Browning and took out the .45 automatic. I didn't have to snap back the action. There was always a slug in the chamber. I started moving carefully through the room. It was a locker room of some kind. There was glass and debris all over the floor, and one entire row of metal lockers had the paint blistered off their surfaces. The flash blast had caught them through the windows a lot of years ago. My sneakers didn't make a sound coming through the room. The door was hanging on one hinge, and I stepped over through the inverted triangle. I was in the swimming pool area. The big pool was empty, with tiles buckled down at the shallow end. It stunk bad in there. No wonder. There were dead guys, or what was left of them, along one wall. Some lousy cleaner-up had stacked them, but hadn't buried them. I pulled my bandana up around my nose and mouth and kept moving. out the other side of the pool place and through a little passage with popped light bulbs in the ceiling. I didn't have any trouble seeing. There was moonlight coming through busted windows and a chunk was out of the ceiling. I could hear her real plain now, just on the other side of the door at the end of the passage. I hung close to the wall and stepped down to the door. It was open a crack, but blocked by a fall of lath and plaster from the wall. It would make noise when I went to pull it open, that was for certain. I had to wait for the right moment. Flattened against the wall, I checked out what she was doing in there. It was a gymnasium, big one, with climbing ropes hanging down from the ceiling. She had a squat, square 8-cell flashlight sitting up on the croup of a vaulting horse. There were parallel bars and a horizontal bar about 8 feet high, the tempered steel all rusty now. There were swinging rings and a trampoline and a big wooden balancing beam. Over to one side there were wall bars and balancing benches, horizontal and oblique ladders, and a couple of stacks of vaulting boxes. I made a note to remember this joint. It was better for working out than the jerry-rigged gym I'd set up in an old auto wrecking yard. A guy has to keep in shape if he's going to be a solo. She was out of her disguise, standing there in the skin, shivering. Yeah, it was chilly, and I could see a pattern of chicken skin all over her. She was maybe 5'6" or 7, with nice tits and kind of skinny legs. She was brushing out her hair. It hung way down her back. The flashlight didn't make it clear enough to tell if she had red hair or chestnut, but it wasn't blonde, which was good, and that was because I dug redheads. She had nice tits, though. I couldn't see her face. The hair was hanging down all smooth and wavy and cut off her profile. The crap she'd been wearing was thrown around on the floor, and what she was going to put on was up on the vaulting horse. She was standing in little shoes with kind of a funny heel on them. I couldn't move. I suddenly realized I couldn't move. She was nice, really nice, and I was getting a real big kick out of just standing there and seeing the way her waist fell inward and her hips fell outward, the way the muscles at the side of her tits pulled up when she reached the top of her head to brush all that hair down. It was really weird, the kick I was getting out of standing and just staring at a chick do that. Kind of very, well, woman stuff. I liked it a lot. I'd never stopped and just looked at a chick like that. All the ones I'd ever seen had been scumbags that blood had smelled out for me, and I'd snatched and grabbed them. Or the big chicks in the beaver flicks. Not like this one. Kind of soft and very smooth, even with the goosebumps. I could have watched her all night. She put down the brush and reached over and took a pair of panties off the pile of clothes and wriggled into them. Then she got her bra and put it on. I never knew the way chicks did it. She put it on backwards around her waist, and it had a hook on it, and then she slid it around till the cups were in front, and kind of pulled it up under and scooped herself into it, first one, then the other. Then she pulled the straps over her shoulder. She reached for her dress, and I nudged some of the lath and plaster aside, and grabbed the door to give it a yank. She had the dress up over her head and her arms up inside the material, and when she stuck her head in, and was all tangled there for a second, I yanked the door and there was a crash as chunks of wood and plaster fell out of the way, and a heavy scraping, and I jumped inside and was on her before she could get out of the dress. She started to scream and I pulled the dress off her with a ripping sound, and it all happened for her before she knew what the crash and scrape was all about. Her face was wild, just wild. Big eyes. I couldn't tell what color they were because they were in shadow. Real fine features, a wide mouth, little nose, cheekbones just like mine, real high and prominent, and a dimple in her right cheek. She stared at me really scared. And then, and this is really weird, I felt like I should say something to her. I don't know what, just something. It made me uncomfortable to see her scared, but what the hell could I do about it? I mean, I was going to rape her, and I couldn't very well tell her not to be shrinky about it. She was the one who come up, after all, but even so, I wanted to say, hey, don't be scared. I just want to lay you. That never happened before. I never wanted to say anything to a chick, just get it in, and that was that. But it passed, and I put my leg behind hers and tripped her back, and she went down in a pile. I leveled the .45 at her, and her mouth kind of opened in a little O shape. Now I'm going to go over there and get one of them wrestling mats, so it'll be better, comfortable, Uh-huh. You make a move off that floor and I shoot a leg out from under you, and you'll get screwed just the same, except you'll be without a leg. I waited for her to let me know she was onto what I was saying, and she finally nodded real slow. So I kept the automatic on her and went over to the big dusty stack of mats and pulled one off. I dragged it over to her and flipped it so the cleaner side was up, and used the muzzle of the 45 to maneuver her onto it. She just sat there on the mat with her hands behind her and her knees bent and stared at me. I unzipped my pants and started pulling them down off one side when I caught her looking at me real funny. I stopped with the jeans. "What are you looking at?" I was mad. I didn't know why I was mad, but I was. "What's your name?" she asked. Her voice was very soft and kind of furry, like it came up through her throat that was all lined with fur or something. She kept looking at me, waiting for an answer. "Vic," I said. She looked like she was waiting for more. "Vic what?" I didn't know what she meant for a minute. Then I did. "Vic. Just Vic. That's all." "Well, what are your mother's and father's names?" I started laughing and working my jeans down again. "Boy, you are a dumb bitch," I said and laughed some more. She looked hurt. It made me mad again. "Stop looking like that or I'll bust your fucking teeth out." She folded her hands in her lap. I got the pants around my ankles. They wouldn't come off over the sneakers. I had to balance on one foot and scuff the sneaker off the other foot. It was tricky, keeping the 45 on her and getting the sneaker off at the same time, but I did it. I was standing there buck naked from the waist down, and she had sat forward a little, her legs crossed, hands still in her lap. "Get that stuff off," I said. She didn't move for a second, and I thought she was going to give me trouble. But then she reached around behind and undid her bra. Then she tipped back and slipped the panties off her ass. Suddenly, she didn't look so scared anymore. She was watching me very closely, and I could see her eyes were blue now. Now this is the really weird thing. I couldn't do it. I mean, not exactly. I wanted to fuck her, but she was all soft and pretty, and she kept looking at me. And no solo I ever met would believe me, but I heard myself talking to her, still standing there like some kind of wet brain, one sneaker off and jeans down around my ankles. "What's your name?" "Quilla June Holmes." "That's a weird name." "My mother says it's not that uncommon, back in Oklahoma." "That where your folks come from?" She nodded. "Before the Third War." "They must be pretty old by now." "They are, but they're okay, I guess." We were just frozen there, talking to each other. I could tell she was cold because she was shivering. "Well," I said, sort of getting ready to drop down beside her, "I guess we better—" Damn it! That damned blood! Right at that moment, he came crashing in from outside, came skidding through the lath and plaster, raising dust, slid along on his ass till he got to us. "Now what?" I demanded. "Who are you talking to?" the girl asked. "Him. Blood." "The dog?" Blood stared at her and then ignored her. He started to say something, but the girl interrupted him. "Then it's true what they say. You can talk to animals. You going to listen to her all night, or do you want to hear why I came in? Okay, why are you here?" "You're in trouble, Albert." "Come on, forget the Mickey Mouse. What's up?" Blood twisted his head toward the front door of the YMCA. "Rover pack. Got the building surrounded. Make it 15 or 20, maybe more." "How the hell did they know we was here?" Blood looked chagrined. He dropped his head. "Well?" "Some other mutt must have smelled her in the theater." "Great. Now what?" "Now we stand him off, that's what. You got any better suggestions?" "Just one." I waited. He grinned. "Pull up your pants." The girl, this Quilla June, was pretty safe. I made her a kind of shelter out of wrestling mats, maybe a dozen of them. She wouldn't get hit by a stray bullet, and if they didn't go right for her, they wouldn't find her. I climbed one of the ropes hanging down from the girders and laid out up there with the Browning and a couple of handfuls of reloads. I wish to God I'd had an automatic, a Bren or a Thompson. I checked the 45, made sure it was full, with one in the chamber, and set the extra clips down on the girder. I had a clear line of fire all around the gym. Blood was lying in shadow right near the front door. He suggested I try and pick off any dogs with the rover pack first, if I could. That would allow him to operate freely. That was the least of my worries. I'd wanted to hole up in another room, one with only a single entrance, but I had no way of knowing if the rovers were already in the building, so I did my best with what I had. Everything was quiet, even that Quilla June. It had taken me valuable minutes to convince her she'd damn well better hole up and not make any noise. She was better off with me than with 20 of them. If you ever want to see your mommy and daddy again, I warned her. After that, she didn't give me no trouble packing her in with the mats. Quiet. Then I heard two things, both at the same time. From back in the swimming pool, I heard boots crunching plaster, very soft, and from one side of the front door, I heard a tinkle of metal striking wood. So they were going to try a yoke. Well, I was ready. Quiet again. I sighted the Browning on the door to the pool room. It was still open from when I'd come through. Figure him at maybe 5'10", drop the sights 1.5 feet, and I'd catch him in the chest. I'd learned long ago you don't try for the head. Go for the widest part of the body, the chest and stomach, the trunk. Suddenly, outside, I heard a dog bark, and part of the darkness near the front door detached itself and moved inside the gym, directly opposite Blood. I didn't move the Browning. The rover at the front door moved a step along the wall, away from Blood, and then he cocked back his arm and threw something, a rock, a piece of metal, something, across the room to draw fire. I didn't move the Browning. When the thing he'd thrown hit the floor, two rovers jumped out of the swimming pool door, one on either side of it, rifles down, ready to spray. Before they could open up, I'd squeezed off the first shot, tracked across and put a second shot into the other one. They both went down. Dead hits, right in the heart. Bang, they were down. Neither one moved. The mother by the door turned to split, and Blood was on him, just like that, out of the darkness. Rip. Blood leaped, right over the crossbar of the guy's rifle, held it ready, and sank his fangs into the rover's throat. The guy screamed and Blood dropped, carrying a piece of the guy with him. The guy was making awful bubbling sounds and went down on one knee. I put a slug into his head and he fell forward. It went quiet again. Not bad. Not bad at all. 3 takeouts and they still didn't know our positions. Blood had fallen back into the murk by the entrance. He didn't say a thing, but I knew what he was thinking. Maybe that was 3 out of 17, or 3 out of 20, or 22. No way of knowing. We could be faced off in here for a week and never know if we'd gotten them all, or some, or none. They could go and get poured full again, and I'd find myself run out of slugs and no food, and that girl, that Quilla June, crying and making me divide my attention and daylight, and they'd be still laying out there, waiting till we got hungry enough to do something dumb, or till we ran out of slugs, and then they'd cloud up and rain all over us. A rover came dashing straight through the front door at top speed, took a leap, hit on his shoulders, rolled, came up going in a different direction, and snapped off 3 rounds into different corners of the room before I could track him with the Browning. By that time, he was close enough under me where I didn't have to waste a .22 slug. I picked up the .45 without a sound and blew the back off his head. Slug went in neat, came out and took most of his hair with it. He fell right down. Blood, the rifle, came out of the shadows, grabbed it up in his mouth and dragged it over to the pile of wrestling mats in the far corner. I saw an arm poke out from the mass of mats, and a hand grabbed the rifle, dragged it inside. Well, it was at least safe there till I needed it. Brave little bastard. He scuttled over to the dead rover and started worrying the ammo bandolier off his body. Took him a while. He could have been picked off from the doorway or outside one of the windows, but he did it. Brave little bastard. I had to remember to get him something good to eat when we got out of this. I smiled up there in the darkness. If we got out of this, I wouldn't have to worry about getting him something tender. It was lying all over the floor of that gymnasium. Just as Blood was dragging the bandolier back into the shadows, 2 of them tried it with their dogs. They came through a ground floor window, one after another, hitting and rolling and going in opposite directions, as the dogs, a mother ugly Akita big as a house, and a Doberman bitch color of a turd, shot through the front door and split in the unoccupied 2 directions. I caught one of the dogs, the Akita, with the .45, and it went down thrashing. The Doberman was all over blood. But firing, I'd given away my position. One of the rovers fired from the hip, and 30-06 soft-nosed slugs spanged off the girders around me. I dropped the automatic, and it started to slip off the girder as I reached for the Browning. I made a grab for the 45, and that was the only thing saved me. I fell forward to clutch at it. It slipped away and hit the gym floor with a crash, and the rover fired at where I'd been. But I was flat on the girder, arm dangling, and the crash startled him. He fired at the sound, and right at that instant I heard another shot from a Winchester, and the other rover, who'd made it safe into the shadows, fell forward holding a big pumping hole in his chest. That Quilla June had shot him from behind the mats. I didn't even have time to figure out what the fuck was happening. Blood was rolling around with the Doberman, and the sounds they were making were awful. The rover with the 30-06 chipped off another shot and hit the muzzle of the Browning, protruding over the side of the girder, and wham, it was gone, falling down. I was naked up there without clout, and the son of a bitch was hanging back in the shadow waiting for me. Another shot from the Winchester, and the rover fired right into the mats. She ducked back behind, and I knew I couldn't count on her for anything anymore. But I didn't need it. In that second, while he was focused on her, I grabbed the climbing rope, flipped myself over the girder, and howling like a burn pit screamer went sliding down, feeling the rope cutting my palms. I got down far enough to swing and kicked off. I swung back and forth, whipping my body 3 different ways each time, swinging out and over, way over each time. The son of a bitch kept firing, trying to track a trajectory, but I kept spinning out of his line of fire. Then he was empty, and I kicked back as hard as I could and came zooming in towards his corner of shadows and let loose all at once and went ass over end into the corner. And there he was, and I went right into him and he spanged off the wall, and I was on top of him, digging my thumbs into his eye sockets. He was screaming, and the dogs were screaming, and that girl was screaming, and I pounded the motherfucker's head against the floor till he stopped moving. Then I grabbed up the empty 30-06 and whipped his head, till I knew he wasn't going to give me no more aggravation. Then I found the 45 and shot the Doberman. Blood got up and shook himself off. He was cut up bad. "Thanks," he mumbled, and went over to lie down in the shadows to lick himself off. I went and found that Quilla June, and she was crying about all the guys we'd killed, mostly about the one she'd killed. I couldn't get her to stop bawling, so I cracked her across the face and told her she'd saved my life, and that helped some. Blood came drag-assing over. "How are we going to get out of this, Albert?" "Let me think." I thought, and I knew it was hopeless. No matter how many we got, there'd be more, and it was a matter of macho now, their honor. "How about a fire?" Blood suggested. "Get away while it's burning?" I shook my head. "They'll have the place staked out all around. No good." "What if we don't leave? What if we burn up with it?" I looked at him. Brave and smart as hell. We gathered all the lumber and mats and scaling ladders and vaulting boxes and benches and anything else that would burn, and piled the garbage against a wooden divider at one end of the gym. Quilla June found a can of kerosene in a storeroom, and we set fire to the whole damn pile. Then we followed Blood to the place he'd found for us, the boiler room way down under the YMCA. We all climbed into the empty boiler and dogged down the door, leaving a release vent for air. We had one mat in there with us, and all the ammo we could carry, and the extra rifles and sidearms the rovers had on them. "Can you catch anything?" I asked Blood. "A little, not much. I'm reading one guy. The building's burning good. You'll be able to tell when they split?" "Maybe, if they split." I settled back. Quilla June was shaking from all that had happened. "Just take it easy," I told her. "By morning, the place will be down around our ears, and they'll go through the rubble and find a lot of dead meat, and maybe they won't look too hard for a chick's body, and everything will be all right, if we don't get choked off in here." She smiled very thin and tried to look brave. She was okay, that one. She closed her eyes and settled back on the mat and tried to sleep. I was beat. I closed my eyes, too. "Can you handle it?" I asked Blood. "I suppose. You better sleep." I nodded. Eyes still closed and fell on my side. I was out before I could think about it. When I came back, I found the girl, that Quilla June, snuggled up under my armpit, her arm around my waist, dead asleep. I could hardly breathe. It was like a furnace. Hell, it was a furnace. I reached out a hand and the wall of the boiler was so damned hot I couldn't touch it. Blood was up on the mattress with us. The mat had been the only thing that had kept us from being singed good. He was asleep, head buried in his paws. She was asleep, still naked. I put a hand on her tit. It was warm. She stirred and cuddled into me closer. I got a hard-on, managed to pull my pants off and rolled on top of her. She woke up fast when she felt me pry her legs apart, but it was too late by then. "Don't! Stop! What are you doing? No! Don't!" But she was half asleep and weak, and I don't think she really wanted to fight me anyhow. She cried when I broke her, of course, but after that it was okay. There was blood all over the wrestling mat, and Blood the dog just kept sleeping. It was really different. Usually when I'd get Blood to track something down for me, it'd be grab it and punch it and pork it and get away fast before something bad could happen. But when she came, she rose up off the mat and hugged me around the back so hard I thought she'd crack my ribs, and then she settled back down, slow, 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 like I do when I'm doing leg lifts in the makeshift gym I rigged in the auto wrecking yard, and her eyes were closed, and she was relaxed looking, and happy, I could tell. We did it a lot of times, and after a while it was her idea, but I didn't say no, and then we laid out side by side and talked. She asked me how it was with Blood, and I told her how the skirmisher dogs had gotten telepathic, and how they'd lost the ability to hunt food for themselves, so the solos and rover packs had to do it for them, and how dogs like Blood were good at finding chicks for solos like me. She didn't say anything to that. I asked her about what it was like where she lived, in one of the down unders. "It's nice, but it's always very quiet. Everyone is very polite to everyone else. It's just a small town." "Which one you live in?" "Topeka. It's real close to here." "Yeah, I know. The access drop shaft is only about a half-mile from here. I went out there once to take a look around." "Have you ever been in a down under?" "No, but I guess I don't want to be either." "Why? It's very nice. You'd like it." "Shit. That's very crude." "I'm very crude." "Not all the time." I was getting mad. "Listen, you ass, what's the matter with you? I grabbed you and pushed you around. I raped you half a dozen times. So what's so good about me, huh? What's the matter with you? Don't you even have enough smarts to know when somebody's—" She was smiling at me. "I don't mind. I like doing it. Want to do it again?" I was really shocked. I moved away from her. "The hell is wrong with you? Don't you know that a chick from a down under like you can be mauled by solos? Don't you know chicks get warnings from their parents in the down unders? Don't come up or you get snagged by them dirty, hairy, slobbering solos. Don't you know that?" She put her hand on my leg and started moving it up, the fingertips just brushing my thigh. I got another hard-on. "My parents never said that about solos," she said. Then she pulled me over her again and kissed me, and I couldn't stop from getting it in her. God, it went on like that for hours. After a while, Blood turned around and said, "I'm not going to keep pretending I'm asleep. I'm hungry and I'm hurt." I tossed her off me. She was on top of me by this time and examined him. The Doberman had taken a good chunk out of his right ear, and there was a rip right down his muzzle, and blood-matted fur on one side. He was a mess. "Jesus, man, you're a mess," I said. "You're no fucking rose garden yourself, Albert," he snapped. I pulled my hand back. "Can we get out of here?" I asked him. He cast around and then shook his head. "I can't get any readings. Must be a pile of rubble on top of this boiler. I'll have to go out and scout." We kicked that around for a while and finally decided if the building was raised and it cooled a little, the rover pack would have gone through the ashes by now. The fact that they hadn't tried the boiler indicated that we were probably buried pretty good. Either that or the building was still smoldering overhead, in which case they'd still be out there, waiting to sift the remains. "Think you can handle it, the condition you're in?" "I guess I'll have to, won't I?" Blood said. He was really surly. I mean, what with you busy fucking your brains out, there won't be much left for staying alive, will there? I sensed real trouble with him. He didn't like Quilla June. I moved around him and undogged the boiler hatch. It wouldn't open, so I braced my back against the side and jacked my legs up and gave it a slow, steady shove. Whatever had fallen against it from outside resisted for a minute, then started to give, then tumbled away with a crash. I pushed the door all the way open and looked out. The upper floors had fallen in on the basement, but by the time they'd given, they'd been mostly cinder and lightweight rubble. Everything was smoking out there. I could see daylight through the smoke. I slipped out, burning my hands on the outside lip of the hatch. Blood followed. He started to pick his way through the debris. I could see that the boiler had been almost completely covered by the gunk that had dropped down from above. Chances were good the rover pack had taken a fast look, figured we'd been fried and moved on. But I wanted Blood to run a recon anyway. He started off, but I called him back. He came. What is it? I looked down at him. I'll tell you what it is, man. You're acting very shitty. Sue me. God damn it, dog. What's up your ass? Her. That knit chick you've got in there. So what? Big deal. I've had chicks before. Yeah, but never any that hung on like this one. I warn you, Albert. She's going to make trouble. Don't be dumb. He didn't reply. Just looked at me with anger and then limped off to check the scene. I crawled back inside and dogged the hatch. She wanted to make it again. I said I didn't want to. Blood had brought me down. I was bugged. I didn't know which one to be pissed off at. But God, she was pretty. She kind of pouted and settled back with her arms wrapped around her. Tell me some more about the Down Under, I said. At first, she was cranky, wouldn't say much. But after a while, she opened up and started talking freely. I was learning a lot. I figured I could use it sometime, maybe. There were only a couple of hundred Down Unders in what was left of the United States and Canada. They'd been sunk on the sites of wells or mines or other kinds of deep holes. Some of them, out in the west, were in natural cave formations. They went way down, maybe 2 to 5 miles. They were like big caissons stood on end, and the people who'd settled them were squares of the worst kind. Southern Baptists, fundamentalists, law and order goofs, real middle-class squares with no taste for the wildlife, and they'd gone back to a kind of life that hadn't existed for 150 years. They'd gotten the last of the scientists to do the work, invent the how and why, and then they'd run them out. They didn't want progress. They didn't want dissent. They didn't want anything that would make waves. They'd had enough of that. The best time in the world had been just before the First War, and they figured if they could keep it like that, they could live quiet lives and survive. Shit, I'd go nuts in one of the Down Unders. Quilla June smiled and snuggled up again, and this time I didn't turn her off. She started touching me again, down there and all over, and then she said, Vic? Uh-huh. Have you ever been in love? What? In love. Have you ever been in love with a girl? Well, I damned well guess I haven't. Do you know what love is? Sure, I guess I do. But if you've never been in love, don't be dumb. I mean, I've never had a bullet in the head, and I know I wouldn't like it. You don't know what love is, I'll bet. Well, if it means living in a Down Under, I guess I just don't want to find out. We didn't go on with the conversation much after that. She pulled me down and we did it again. And when it was over, I heard Blood scratching at the boiler. I opened the hatch and he was standing out there. All clear, he said. You sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Put your pants on. He said it with a sneer in his tone. And come on out here. We have to talk some stuff. I looked at him and he wasn't kidding. I got my jeans and sneakers on and climbed down out of the boiler. He trotted ahead of me, away from the boiler over some black soot beams and outside the gym. It was down, looked like a rotted stump tooth. Now what's lumbering you? I asked him. He scampered up on a chunk of concrete till he was almost nose level with me. You're going dumb on me, Vic. I knew he was serious. No Albert shit. Straight Vic. How so? Last night, man. We could have cut out of there and left her for them. That would have been smart. I wanted her. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm talking about. It's today now, not last night. You've had her about 100 times. Why are we hanging around? I want some more. Then he got angry. Yeah, well, listen, chum. I want a few things myself. I want something to eat. I want to get rid of the pain in my side. And I want away from this turf. Maybe they don't give up this easy. Take it easy. We can handle all that. Don't mean she can't go with us. Doesn't mean, he corrected me. And so that's the new story? Now we travel 3, is that right? I was getting really uptight myself. You're starting to sound like a damn poodle. And you're starting to sound like a boxer. I hauled back to crack him one. He didn't move. I dropped the hand. I'd never hit blood. I didn't want to start now. Sorry, he said softly. That's okay. But we weren't looking at each other. Vic, man, you've got a responsibility to me, you know. You don't have to tell me that. Well, I guess maybe I do. Maybe I have to remind you of some stuff. Like that time that burn pit screamer came up out of the street and made a grab for you. I shuddered. The motherfucker'd been green, righteous stone green, glowing like fungus. My gut heaved just thinking about it. And I went for him, right? I nodded. Right, Mutt, right. And I could have been burned bad and died, and that would have been all of it for me, right or wrong. Isn't that true? I nodded again. I was getting pissed off, proper. I didn't like being made to feel guilty. It was 50-50 with me and blood. He knew that. But I did it, right? I remembered the way the green thing had screamed. Christ, it was all ooze and eyelashes. Okay. Don't hanger me. Harangue, not hanger. Well, whatever, I shouted. Just knock off the crap, or we can forget the whole fucking arrangement. Then blood blew. Well, maybe we should. You simple dumb putz. What's a putz? You little turd. Is that something bad? Yeah, it must be. You watch your fucking mouth, son of a bitch, or I'll kick your ass. We sat there and didn't talk for 15 minutes. Neither one of us knew which way to go. Finally, I backed off a little. I talked soft and I talked slow. I was about up to here with him, but told him I was going to do right by him, like I always had, and he threatened me, saying I'd damn well better, because there were a couple of very hip solos making it around the city, and they'd be delighted to have a sharp tail scent like him. I told him I didn't like being threatened, and he'd better watch his fucking step or I'd break his leg. He got furious and stalked off. I said screw you and went back to the boiler to take it out on that Quilla June again. But when I stuck my head inside the boiler, she was waiting, with a pistol of one of the dead rovers. She hit me good and solid over the right eye with it, and I fell straight forward over the hatch and was out cold. I told you she was no good. He watched me as I swabbed out the cut with disinfectant from my kit and painted the gash with iodine. He smirked when I flinched. I put away the stuff and rummaged around in the boiler, gathering up all the spare ammo I could carry, and ditched the Browning in favor of the heavier 30-06. Then I found something that must have slipped out of her clothes. It was a little metal plate, about 3 inches long and 1.5 inches high. It had a whole string of numbers on it, and there were holes in it in random places. What's this? I asked Blood. He looked at it, sniffed it. It must be an identity card of some kind. Maybe it's what she used to get out of the Down Under. That made up my mind. I jammed it in a pocket and started out, towards the access drop shaft. Where the hell are you going? Blood yelled after me. Come on back. You'll get killed out there. I'm hungry, damn it. I'm wounded. Albert, you son of a bitch, come back here. I kept right on walking. I was going to find that bitch and brain her, even if I had to go down under to find her. It took me an hour to walk to the access drop shaft leading down to Topeka. I thought I saw Blood following, but hanging back a ways. I didn't give a damn. I was mad. Then there it was, a tall, straight, featureless pillar of shining black metal. It was maybe 20 feet in diameter, perfectly flat on top, disappearing straight into the ground. It was a cap, that was all. I walked straight up to it and fished around in my pocket for that metal card. Then something was tugging at my right pants leg. Listen, you moron, you can't go down there. I kicked him off, but he came right back. Listen to me! I turned around and stared at him. Blood sat down. The powder puffed up around him. Albert. My name is Vic, you little egg sucker. Okay, no foolin'. Vic. His tone softened. Vic, come on, man. He was trying to get through to me. I was really boiling, but he was trying to make sense. I shrugged and crouched down beside him. Listen, man, Blood said. This chick has bent you way out of shape. You know you can't go down there. It's all square and settled, and they know everyone. They hate solos. Enough rover packs have raided down under. They raped their women and stole their food. They'll have defenses set up. They'll kill you, Vic. The hell do you care? You're always saying you'd be better off without me. He sagged at that. Vic, we've been together almost 3 years, good and bad. But this can be the worst. I'm scared, man. Scared you won't come back. And I'm hungry, and I'll have to go find some dude who'll take me on. And you know most solos are in packs now. I'll be the low mutt. I'm not that young anymore, and I'm hurt pretty bad. I could dig it. He was talking sense, but all I could think of was how that bitch, that Quilla June, had wrapped me. And then there were images of her soft tits, and the way she made little sounds when I was in her. And I shook my head, and I knew I had to get even. I gotta do it, Blood. I got to. He breathed deep and sagged a little more. He knew it was useless. You don't even see what she's done to you, Vic. That metal card? It's too easy. She wanted you to follow. I got up. I'll try to be back quick. Will you wait? He was silent a long while, and I waited. Finally, he said, For a while. Maybe I'll be here, maybe I won't. I understood. I turned around and started walking around the pillar of black metal. Finally, I found a slot in the pillar and slipped the metal card into it. There was a soft humming sound. Then a section of the pillar dilated. I hadn't even seen the lines of the sections. A circle opened and I took a step through. I turned and there was Blood, watching me. We looked at each other. All the while, that pillar was humming. So long, Vic. Take care of yourself, Blood. Hurry back. I'll do my best. Yeah, right. Then I turned around and stepped inside. The access portal irised closed behind me. I should have known. I should have suspected. Sure, every once in a while a chick came up to see what it was like on the surface, what had happened to the cities. Sure, it happened. Why, I believed her when she told me, cuddled up beside me in that steaming boiler, that she'd wanted to see what it was like when a girl did it with a guy, that all the flicks she'd seen in Topeka were sweet and solid and dull, and the girls in her school talked about beaver flicks, and one of them had a little 8-page comic book and she'd read it with wide eyes. Sure, I'd believed her. It was logical. I should have suspected something when she left that metal ID plate behind. It was too easy. Blood tried to tell me. Dumb, yeah. The second that access iris swirled closed behind me, the humming got louder, and some cool light grew in the walls. Wall. It was a circular compartment with only 2 sides to the wall, inside and outside. The wall pulsed up light and the humming got louder, and the deck plate I was standing on dilated just the way the outside port had done. But I was standing there like a mouse in a cartoon, and as long as I didn't look down, I was cool. I wouldn't fall. Then I started settling, dropped through the floor. The iris closed overhead. I was dropping down the tube, picking up speed but not too much, just dropping steadily. Now I knew what a drop shaft was. Down and down I went, and every once in a while I'd see something like 10 Lev, or Anti-Pole 55, or BreederCon, or Pump SE6 on the wall. Faintly I could make out the sectioning of an iris, but I never stopped dropping. Finally, I dropped all the way to the bottom, and there was Topeka City Limits, population 22,860 on the wall, and I settled down without any strain, bending a little from the knees to cushion the impact, but even that wasn't much. I used the metal plate again, and the iris, a much bigger one this time, swirled open, and I got my first look at a down under. It stretched away in front of me 20 miles to the dim shining horizon of tin can metal, where the wall behind me curved and curved and curved, till it made one smooth encircling circuit and came back around to where I stood, staring at it. I was down at the bottom of a big metal tube that stretched up to a ceiling an eighth of a mile overhead, 20 miles across, and in the bottom of that tin can, someone had built a town that looked for all the world like a photo out of one of the waterlogged books in the library on the surface. I'd seen a town like this in the books, just like this, neat little houses, and curvy little streets, and trim lawns, and a business section and everything else that a Topeka would have, except a sun, except birds, except clouds, except rain, except snow, except cold, except wind, except ants, except dirt, except mountains, except oceans, except big fields of grain, except stars, except the moon, except forests, except animals running wild, except freedom. They were canned down here, like dead fish, canned. I felt my throat tighten up. I wanted out, out. I started to tremble. My hands were cold and there was sweat on my forehead. This was insane coming down here. I had to get out, out. I turned around to get back in the drop shaft, and then it grabbed me. That bitch Quilla June. I should have suspected. The thing was low and green and box-like, and had cables with mittens on the ends instead of arms, and it rolled on tracks, and it grabbed me. It hoisted me up on its square flat top, holding me with them mittens on the cables. I couldn't move, except to try kicking at the big glass eye in front, but it didn't do any good. It didn't bust. The thing was only about 4 feet high, and my sneakers almost reached the ground, but not quite, and it started moving off into Topeka, hauling me along with it. People were all over the place, sitting in rockers on their front porches, raking their lawns, hanging around the gas station, sticking pennies in gumball machines, painting a white stripe down the middle of the road, selling newspapers on a corner, listening to an oompa band on a shell in a park, playing hopscotch and Pussy in the Corner, polishing a fire engine, sitting on benches reading, washing windows, pruning bushes, tipping hats to ladies, collecting milk bottles in wire carrying racks, grooming horses, throwing a stick for a dog to retrieve, diving into a communal swimming pool, chalking vegetable prices on a slate outside a grocery, walking hand in hand with a girl, all of them watching me go past on that metal motherfucker. I could hear Blood speaking, saying just what he'd said before I'd entered the drop shaft. It's all square and settled, and they know everyone. They hate solos. Enough rover packs have raided down under. They raped their women and stole their food. They'll have defenses set up. They'll kill you, Vic. Thanks, Mutt. Goodbye. The green box tracked through the business section and turned in at a shop front with the words Better Business Bureau on the window. It rolled right inside the open door, and there were half a dozen men and old men and very old men in there, waiting for me. Also a couple of women. The green box stopped. One of them came over and took the metal plate out of my hand. He looked at it, then turned around and gave it to the oldest of the men, a withered toad wearing baggy pants and green eye shade and garters that held up the sleeves of his striped shirt. Quilla June, Lou, the guy said to the old man. Lou took the metal plate and put it in the top left drawer of a roll-top desk. Better take his guns, Aaron, the old coot said, and the guy who'd taken the plate cleaned me. Let him loose, Aaron, Lou said. Aaron stepped around the back of the green box and something clicked, and the cable mittens sucked back inside the box, and I got down off the thing. My arms were numb where the box had held me. I rubbed one, then the other, and I glared at them. Now, boy, Lou started. Suck wind, asshole. The women blanched. The men tightened their faces. I told you it wouldn't work, another of the old men said to Lou. Bad business, this one, said one of the younger ones. Lou leaned forward in his straight-backed chair and pointed a crumbled finger at me. Boy, you'd better be nice. I hope all your fucking children are hair-lipped. This is no good, Lou, another man said. Gutter snipe, a woman with a beak snapped. Lou stared at me. His mouth was a nasty little black line. I knew the son of a bitch didn't have a tooth in his crummy head that wasn't rotten and smelly. He stared at me with vicious little eyes. God, he was ugly. Like a toad ready to snaffle a fly off the wall with his tongue. He was getting set to say something I wouldn't like. Aaron, maybe you'd better put the sentry back on him. Aaron moved to the green box. Okay, hold it, I said, holding up my hands. Aaron stopped, looked at Lou, who nodded. Then Lou leaned real far forward again and aimed that bird claw at me. You ready to behave yourself, son? Yeah, I guess. You'd better be dang sure. Okay, I'm dang sure. Also fucking sure. And watch your mouth. I didn't reply. Old coot. You're a bit of an experiment for us, boy. We tried to get one of you down here other ways, sent some good folks up to capture one of you little scuts, but they never came back. Figured it was best to lure you down to us. I sneered. That Quilla June. I'd take care of her. One of the women, a little younger than Birdbeak, came forward and looked into my face. Lou, you'll never get this one to kowtow. He's a filthy little killer. Look at those eyes. How'd you like the barrel of a rifle jammed up your ass, bitch? She jumped back. Lou was angry again. Sorry, I said real quick. I don't like being called names. Macho, you know. He settled back and snapped at the woman. Mez, leave him alone. I'm trying to talk a bit of sense here. You're only making it worse. Mez went back and sat with the others. Some better business bureau these creeps were. As I was saying, boy, you're an experiment for us. We've been down here in Topeka close to 30 years. It's nice down here. Quiet, orderly, nice people who respect each other. No crime, respect for elders, and just all around a good place to live. We're growing and we're prospering. I waited. But, well, we find now that some of our folks can't have no more babies, and the women that do, they have mostly girls. We need some men, certain special kind of men. I started laughing. This was too good to be true. They wanted me for stud service. I couldn't stop laughing. Crude, one of the women said, scowling. This is awkward enough for us, boy. Don't make it no harder. Lou was embarrassed. Here I'd spent most of Blood's and my time above ground hunting up tail, and down here they wanted me to service the local lady folk. I sat down on the floor and laughed till tears ran down my cheeks. Finally, I got up and said, Sure, okay. But if I do, there's a couple of things I want. Lou looked at me close. The first thing I want is that Quilla June. I'm going to fuck her blind, and then I'm going to bang her on the head the way she did me. They huddled for a while, then came out, and Lou said, We can't tolerate any violence down here, but I suppose Quilla June's as good a place to start as any. She's capable, isn't she, Ira? A skinny, yellow-skinned man nodded. He didn't look happy about it. Quilla June's old man, I bet. Well, let's get started, I said. Line 'em up. I started to unzip my pants. The women screamed. The men grabbed me, and they hustled me off to a boarding house where they gave me a room, and they said I should get to know Topeka a little bit before I went to work, because it was, well, awkward, and they had to get the folks in town to accept what was going to have to be done, on the assumption, I suppose, that if it worked out okay, they'd import a few more young bulls from above ground and turn us loose. So I spent some time in Topeka, getting to know the folks, seeing what they did, how they lived. It was nice, real nice. They rocked in rockers on front porches, they raked their lawns, they hung around the gas stations, they stuck pennies in gumball machines, they painted white stripes down the middle of the road, they sold newspapers on the corners, they listened to oompa bands on a shell in the park, they played hopscotch and pussy in the corner, they polished fire engines, they sat on benches reading, they washed windows and pruned bushes, they tipped their hats to ladies, they collected milk bottles and wire carrying racks, they groomed horses and threw sticks for their dogs, they dove into the communal swimming pool, they chalked vegetable prices on a slate outside the grocery, They walked hand in hand with some of the ugliest chicks I'd ever seen, and they bored the fucking ass off me. Inside a week, I was ready to scream. I could feel that tin can closing in on me. I could feel the weight of the earth over me. They ate artificial shit, artificial peas and fake meat and make-believe chicken, and ersatz corn and bogus bread, and it all tasted like chalk and dust. Polite? Christ, you could puke from the lying hypocritical crap they called civility. Hello, Mr. This, and hello, Mrs. That, and how are you? And how is little Janie? And how is business? And are you going to the sodality meeting Thursday? And I started gibbering in my room at the boarding house. The clean, sweet, neat, lovely way they lived was enough to kill a guy. No wonder the men couldn't get it up and make babies that had balls instead of pussies. The first few days, everyone watched me like I was about to explode and cover their nice whitewashed fences with shit. But after a while, they got used to seeing me. Lou took me over to the mercantile, got me fitted out with a pair of bib overalls and a shirt that any solo could have spotted a mile away. That Mez, that dippy bitch who'd called me a killer, she started hanging around. Finally, she said she wanted to cut my hair, make me look civilized, but I was hip to where she was at. Wasn't a bit of mother in her. What's the matter, cunt? I pinned her. Your old man isn't taking care of you? She tried to stick her fist in her mouth, and I laughed like a loon. Go chop off his balls, baby. My hair stays the way it is. She cut and run, gone like she had a diesel tailpipe. It went on like that for a while, me just walking around, them coming and feeding me, keeping all their young meat out of my way till they got the town sacked away for what was coming with me. Jugged like that, my mind wasn't right for a while. I got all claustrophobed, clutched, went and sat under the porch in the dark at the rooming house. Then that shit passed, and I got piss mean, snapped at them, then surly, then quiet, then just mud dull quiet. Finally, I started getting hip to the possibilities of getting out of there. It began with me remembering the poodle I'd fed blood one time. It had to come from a down under, and it couldn't have gotten up the drop shaft, so that meant there were other ways out. They gave me pretty much the run of the town as long as I kept my manners around me and didn't try anything sudden. That green sentry box was always somewhere nearby. So I found the way out. Nothing so spectacular, it just had to be there and I found it. Then I found out where they kept my weapons, and I was ready. Almost. It was a week to the day when Aaron and Lou and Ira came to get me. I was pretty goofy by that time. I was sitting out on the back porch of the boarding house, smoking a corncob pipe with my shirt off, catching some sun. Except there wasn't no sun. Goofy. They came around the house. Morning, Vic, Lou greeted me. He was hobbling along with a cane, the old fart. Aaron gave me a big smile, the kind you'd give a big black bull about to stuff his meat into a good breed cow. Ira had a look that you could chip off and use in your furnace. Well, howdy, Lou. Morning, Aaron, Ira. Lou seemed right pleased by that. You lousy bastards. Just you wait. You about ready to meet your first lady? Ready as I'll ever be, Lou, I said and got up. Cool smoke, ain't it? Aaron said. I took the corncob out of my mouth. Pure delight, I smiled. I hadn't even lit the fucking thing. They walked me over to Marigold Street, and as we came up on a little house with yellow shutters and a white picket fence, Lou said, This is Ira's house. Quilla June is his daughter. Well, land sakes, I said, wide-eyed. Ira's lean jaw muscles jumped. We went inside. Quilla June was sitting on the couch with her mother, an older version of her, pulled thin as a withered muscle. Miss Holmes, I said, and made a little curtsy. She smiled, strained but smiled. Quilla June sat with her feet together and her hands folded in her lap. There was a ribbon in her hair. It was blue, matched her eyes. Something went thump in my gut. Quilla June, I said. She looked up. Morning, Vic. Then everyone sort of stood around looking awkward, and finally Ira began yapping and yipping about get in the bedroom and get this unnatural filth over with so they could go to church, and pray the good Lord wouldn't strike all of them dead with a bolt of lightning in the ass or some crap like that. So I put out my hand, and Quilla June reached for it without looking up, and we went in the back, into a small bedroom, and she stood there with her head down. "You didn't tell them, did you?" I asked. She shook her head, and suddenly I didn't want to kill her at all. I wanted to hold her, very tight. So I did, and she was crying into my chest and making little fists beating on my back, and then she was looking up at me and running her words all together. "Oh, Vic, I'm sorry, so sorry. I didn't mean to. I had to. I was sent out to. I was so scared, and I love you. And now they've got you down here, and it isn't dirty, is it? It isn't the way my papa says it is it?" I held her and kissed her and told her it was okay. And then I asked her if she wanted to come away with me. And she said yes, 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 she really did. So I told her I might have to hurt her papa to get away. And she got a look in her eyes that I knew real well. For all her propriety, Quilla June Holmes didn't much like her prayer-shouting papa. I asked her if she had anything heavy, like a candlestick or a club. She said no. So I went rummaging around in that back bedroom and found a pair of her papa's socks in a bureau drawer. I pulled the big brass balls off the headboard of the bed and dropped them into the sock. I hefted it. Oh, yeah. She stared at me with big eyes. "What are you going to do?" "You want to get out of here?" She nodded. "Then just stand back behind the door. No, wait a minute. I got a better idea. Get on the bed." She lay down on the bed. "Okay," I said. "Now pull up your skirt. Pull off your pants and spread out." She gave me a look of pure horror. "Do it," I said, "if you want out." So she did it, and I rearranged her so her knees were bent and her legs were open at the thighs, and I stood to one side of the door, and I whispered to her, "Call your papa, just him." She hesitated a long moment. Then she called out in a voice she didn't have to fake, "Papa! Papa, come here, please!" Then she clamped her eyes shut tight. Ira Holmes came to the door, took one look at his secret desire. His mouth dropped open. I kicked the door closed behind him and walloped him as hard as I could. He squished a little and spattered the bedspread and went very down. She opened her eyes when she heard the thunk and when the stuff spattered her legs. She leaned over and puked on the floor. I knew she wouldn't be much good to me in getting Aaron into the room, so I opened the door, stuck my head around, looked worried, and said, "Aaron, would you come here for a minute, please?" He looked at Lou, who was rapping with Mrs. Holmes about what was going on in the back bedroom, and when Lou nodded to him, he came into the room. He took a look at Quilla June's naked bush, at the blood on the wall and bedspread, at Ira on the floor, and opened his mouth to yell just as I whacked him. It took two more to get him down, and then I had to kick him in the chest to put him away. Quilla June was still puking. I grabbed her by the arm and swung her up off the bed. At least she was being quiet about it, but man, did she stink. "Come on." She tried to pull back, but I held on and opened the bedroom door. As I pulled her out, Lou stood up, leaning on his cane. I kicked the cane out from under him, and the old fart went down in a heap. Mrs. Holmes was staring at us, wondering where her old man was. "He's back there," I said, heading for the front door. "The good Lord got him in the head." Then we were out in the street, Quilla June stinking along behind me, dry heaving and bawling and probably wondering what had happened to her panties. They kept my weapons in a locked case at the Better Business Bureau, and we detoured around my boarding house, where I pulled the crowbar I'd swiped from the gas station out from under the back porch. Then we cut across behind the Grange and into the open business section, and straight into the BBB. There was a clerk who tried to stop me, and I split his gourd with the crowbar. Then I pried the latch off the cabinet in Lou's office and got my .30-06 and my .45 and all the ammo, and my spike and knife and my kit, and loaded up. By that time, Quilla June was able to make some sense. "Where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? Oh, Papa, Papa, Papa." "Hey, listen, Quilla June. Papa me no papas. You said you wanted to be with me. Well, I'm going. Up, baby. And if you want to go with me, you better stick close." She was too scared to object. I stepped out the front of the shop front, and there was that green sentry box, coming on like a whippet. It had its cables out, and the mittens were gone. It had hooks. I dropped to one knee, wrapped the sling of the 30-06 around my forearm, sighted clean, and fired dead at the big eye in the front. One shot, spang, hit that eye. The thing exploded in a shower of sparks, and the green box swerved and went through the front window of the mill-end shop, screeching and crying and showering the place with flames and sparks. Nice. I turned around to grab Quilla June, but she was gone. I looked off down the street, and here came all the vigilantes. Lou hobbling along with his cane like some kind of weird grasshopper. And right then the shots started. Big booming sounds. The 45 I'd given Quilla June. I looked up, and on the porch around the second floor, there she was, the automatic down on the railing like a pro, sighting into that mob and snapping off shots like maybe Wild Bill Elliott in a 40s Republic flick. But dumb. Mother dumb. Wasting time on that when we had to get away. I found the outside staircase going up there, took it 3 steps at a time. She was smiling and laughing, and every time she'd pick off one of those boobs out of the pack, her little tongue tip would peek out the corner of her mouth, and her eyes would get all slick and wet, and wham, down the boob would go. She was really into it. Just as I reached her, she sighted down on her scrawny mother. I slammed the back of her head, and she missed the shot, and the old lady did a little dance step and kept coming. Quilla June whipped her head around at me, and there was kill in her eyes. "You made me miss!" The voice gave me a chill. I took the 45 away from her. Dumb. Wasting ammunition like that. Dragging her behind me, I circled the building, found a shed out back, dropped down onto it, and had her follow. She was scared at first, but I said, "Chick can shoot her old lady as easy as you do, shouldn't be worried about such a small drop." She got out on the ledge, other side of the railing, and held on. "Don't worry," I said. "You won't wet your pants. You haven't got any." She laughed like a bird and dropped. I caught her. We slid down the shed door and took a second to see if that mob was hard on us. Nowhere in sight. I grabbed Quilla June by the arm and started off towards the south end of Topeka. It was the closest exit I'd found in any of my wanderings, and we made it there in about 15 minutes, panting and weak as kittens. And there it was, a big air intake duct. I pried off the clamps with the crowbar and we climbed up inside. There were ladders going up. There had to be. It figured. Repairs, keep it clean. Had to be. We started climbing. It took a long, long time. What a thrill. Quilla June kept asking me from down behind, whenever she got too tired to climb, "Vic, do you love me?" I kept saying yes, not only because I meant it. It helped her keep climbing. We came up a mile from the access drop shaft. I shot off the filter covers and the hatch bolts, and we climbed out. They should have known better down there. You don't fuck around with Jimmy Cagney. They never had a chance. Quilla June was exhausted. I didn't blame her, but I didn't want to spend the night out in the open. There were things out there I didn't like to think about meeting even in the daylight. It was getting on towards dusk. We walked towards the access drop shaft. Blood was waiting. He looked weak, but he'd waited. I stooped down and lifted his head. He opened his eyes, and very softly he said, "Hey." I smiled at him. Jesus, it was good to see him. "We made it back, man." He tried to get up, but he couldn't. The wounds on him were in ugly shape. "Have you eaten?" I asked. "No. Grabbed a lizard yesterday. Or maybe it was the day before. I'm hungry, Vic." Quilla June came up then, and Blood saw her. He closed his eyes. "We better hurry, Vic," she said. "Please. They might come up from the drop shaft." I tried to lift Blood, but he was dead weight. "Listen, Blood. I'll leg it into the city and get some food. I'll come back quick. You just wait here. Don't go in there, Vic," he said. "I did recon the day after you went down. They found out we weren't fried in that gym. I don't know how. Maybe the mutts smelled our track. I've been keeping watch, and they haven't tried to come out after us. I don't blame them. You don't know what it's like out here at night, man. You don't know." He shivered. "Take it easy, Blood. But they've got us marked lousy in the city, Vic. We can't go back there. We'll have to make it someplace else. That put it on a different stick. We couldn't go back, and with Blood in that condition, we couldn't go forward. And I knew, good as I was solo, I couldn't make it without him. And there wasn't anything out here to eat. He had to have food at once, and medical care. I had to do something good, something fast. Vic, Quillajune's voice was high and whiny. Come on, he'll be all right. We have to hurry. I looked up at her. The sun was sinking into the darkness. Blood trembled in my arms. She got a pouty look on her face. If you love me, you'll come on. I couldn't make it alone out there without him. I knew it. If I loved her, she asked me in the boiler, do you know what love is? It was a small fire, not nearly big enough for any rover pack to spot from the outskirts of the city. No smoke. And after Blood had eaten his fill, I carried him to the air duct a mile away, and we spent the night inside on that little ledge. I held him all night. He slept good, and in the morning I fixed him up pretty good. He'd make it. He was strong. He ate again. There was plenty left from the night before. I didn't eat. I wasn't hungry. We started off across the blast wasteland that morning. We'd find another city. We'd make it. We had to move slow because Blood was still limping. It took a long time before I stopped hearing her calling in my head, asking me, do you know what love is? Sure I know. A boy loves his dog. You have been listening to an original performance of Harlan Ellison's A Boy and His Dog, read by Kimura Gracie.